Good afternoon, it's Robert Patillo, sitting in for Roland Martin on Roland Martin Unfiltered tonight. Can you hear that? Is this right? Okay.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Wednesday, December 21st. This is Robert Patillo sitting in for Roland Martin on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Tonight, a local Texas nonprofit is urging the Senate to pass the Stop Human Trafficking law. We will talk to the president of the No Trafficking Zone, Bishop James Dixon, and the push to move the legislation forward. Also, Trump's political future is in shambles following the release of his tax returns. Of course, you know President Trump is facing multiple legal issues, including the criminal referral from January 6th committee, the investigation in Fulton County, Georgia, the investigation into the documents of Mar-a-Lago, the investigation in the Northern District of New York. We're going to talk about what all this means with Nola Haynes about the political future of Donald Trump. Also, a Louisiana Parish is fighting to stop the destruction of a company for the building of a large grain plant near a historically black residential neighborhood. To explain the case, we have one of the founders of the Descendants project talking about the litigation they are currently using to try to stop the displacement and destruction of historic black communities. It's in our Tech Talk, we will be talking to the founders of a black-owned dating app that will be working to increase your chances of finding love this holiday season. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered live on the Black Star Network.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on Go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
As all of you know, human trafficking is one of the most significant issues facing our community in this nation. Thousands of children per year are victims of human trafficking, and there's legislation pending before Congress introduced by U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee that will work to curtail human trafficking by ensuring that these individuals face federal penalties if this takes place on school grounds. Joining us now, the president of the No Trafficking Zone, Inc., Miss Jacqueline Aleto. Jacqueline, how are you doing this evening?
Having me on.
Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about this legislation and why it's so important to pass currently?
Sure. SB 5226 was originally a bill that was sponsored by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Congressman Michael McCall, and Congressman Nadler. And what it was specifically designed to make domestic minor sex trafficking, which is sex trafficking of children on our school campuses that are being lured, groomed, and recruited into trafficking, a federal crime. And the reason why that is so important is because we see that these sex crimes are happening across our nation, and there are predators like Jeffrey Epstein that for decades really do not face a harsh penalty. But if it was a federal crime, then we would deter commercial sexual exploitation at least up to 30%, and make predators really think about if they want to buy and sell our children in the United States.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the weight and the breadth of this issue? Because I think we talk a lot about sex trafficking of children kind of obtusely. But can you talk a little bit about the statistics, the numbers behind this, and why this legislation is so crucial right now? Because our children are truly in danger.
Yes, our children are in very much danger, and it is an issue that our media does not cover the way it should. So I really applaud you all for covering this. So I'm just going to read a few statistics, and these statistics go back a decade to now. There was a study in San Diego where 20 high schools participated in this study. Every single high school confirmed that recruitment was happening with students. Of those schools, 18 of them reported documented cases of sex trafficking victimization. 140 staff from the 20 high schools identified 81 confirmed reported victims, along with an additional 54 suspected victims. If that wasn't enough, they also identified 17 recruiters that were targeting their campus. They did a 3-year study by the University of San Diego and released in 2015 that between 8,000 and 11,000 victims, mostly underage girls, are trafficked in San Diego. It doesn't end there, sadly. The FBI, the Bureau of Investigations, also said for their high-intensity child sex trafficking areas are located in the state. San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego are consistently the high volume to national trafficking hotline. School campuses statewide have been impacted as well. Some predators are using school campuses as a new hunting ground. In Illinois, every year in the city of Chicago, 16,000 women and girls fall prey to trafficking. To put this into perspective, that is 2 women every hour of every day. 2 women and girls every hour of every day. This makes Chicago one of the United States' main trafficking hubs. In Virginia, Detective Wolf, who is a human trafficking detective, says he's been working on combating human trafficking and gang activity in the region for years. Detective Wolf has worked with victims as young as 9 years old. Most trafficking victims go to school every day and sleep in their own beds. Their trafficking occurs when they are when they are in school, and will maybe get back home at 8 or 9. Sometimes their parents don't even know. Human trafficking in the North Virginia area, high schools and some junior highs, are happening in every single school. That is in the state of Virginia. And then in the state of Texas, there was a report of 55% of sex trafficking survivors in Texas, while trafficked, said that they were trafficked during school or during school activities, or were approached by either students in school or former students who had graduated, that then introduced them to their groomers or their traffickers. In Florida, with Jeffrey Epstein, at least 32 identified victims by the Royal Palms High School. After that, the Herald identified 80 victims in 2018. So these are just in every state. The statistics are more alarming and more alarming. And I know it's hard for people to understand because we don't really resonate with the term sex trafficking. We should really call it preying. And what predators do is it's their job to prey on our children. And so what more place is in schools where there are all children to get access to them?
I want to bring Bishop James Dixon into this conversation. Bishop Dixon, can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to pass this federal legislation against sex trafficking in our schools? Because I think most people already just assume this was a federal crime. Why is it just now coming up, and what are the blockades to it in Congress?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us on today. We appreciate being on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and we appreciate access to the public's eye and ear and mind. That's exactly what's needed. The reason this has not been a federal crime on this level before is because too few of the American public has been educated on concerning this crisis. If you think about it, I'm a pastor of a church. There are over 80 to 90,000 black churches alone in the U.S., not to mention churches as a whole. Ask 90,000 black churches how many of us have a sex trafficking conversation once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year. How many of us have a sex trafficking ministry? How many of us have a sex trafficking conference? We don't. Most of us have not yet been educated. It's not that we don't care, it's that we're not conscious and competent. And so it's very important that we have opportunities like this to really expose the public to this dreadful scourge and evil. We're organizing around the nation in order to make that happen. Jacqueline Ludo is a champion for this cause, along with a lot of people who understand it, but we've got to grow that number. We need conferences, we need conversations, nationwide, city by city, county by county. In the past, no trafficking zone bills. It needs state, like we have in Texas. I'm talking to bishops and pastors in Illinois right now, Bishop Simon Gordon, and a number of people there in Chicago. They're ready to work with us on passing a no trafficking zone state bill. We need a state bill in Virginia, state bill in California, and we build that momentum. We can knock the door down and get a federal bill against trafficking in schools like the no trafficking zone bill.
And going back to Jacqueline, what do you think are the holdups in Congress? It seems like something that should pass, 99 to nothing in the Senate or a voice vote in the House. Why is it so hard to get legislation like this passed?
That is a really good question. Crimes against children seem to be very hard to get bills passed. Some people would say it's a $150 billion industry, so many people are profiting and participating from it. Others would say that it's simply just because our elected officials and people in power do not know what slavery looks like right now. Human trafficking is slavery of our time. And so for them to understand it and understand the magnitude and how intricate it is seems really to be hard to wrap around elected officials' heads. But something so simple like what happened to New York with a 12-year-old, she was walking down the street with her friends and she met up with two boys who were a couple years older. They went to a party. She woke up. She woke up after having a drink and she was passed out. She was naked and she was being raped. And from that moment on, she was told that she was going to be sold into sex trafficking. It took her almost a decade to be found. But it was something so simple of going to a party. And I think that one of the hangups is with our nation, our elected officials, is that when we think of human trafficking or sex trafficking, we think this is happening in other countries, not understanding that domestic minor sex trafficking, buying and selling of children in the United States, within the United States, is a crisis. And it's a crisis just as big as the border. So it's a crisis that needs the same amount of attention, and not just amount of attention. Our elected officials need to put the power into federal legislation and strong legislation. Because if I'm a sex trafficker, and I know that if I sell drugs, I'm going to go to jail for quite a long time. But if I sell people, I'm not really going to get a harsh penalty and it's so lucrative. Well, then I'm going to buy and sell children.
Bishop Dixon, we hear a lot of lip service about this in Congress and on the campaign trail. What will it take? What does community need to do to hammer this through? We see all this legislation getting passed during this lame-duck session. What does the community need to do to push these things through, particularly when you have in Congress somebody like Matt Gaetz, who's currently accused of doing exactly this, paying a 17-year-old for sex? How do we push this through Congress when we have people like that standing in the way?
Well, it means that we're going to have to really double down. I've not yet seen the kind of movement that's necessary. It shouldn't take all of that. You're right. It shouldn't take all of that, right? Anybody in their right mind knows that it should be illegal and punishable in significant ways to traffic a child, to sell a child for money. That's slavery, and it's the abuse of the worst kind. We're treating our most vulnerable like their property and like their products for sale. That's unacceptable in a civil society anywhere on the planet, and should be here in the U.S. We've got to go to the front door of every congressperson, every senator who opposes passing these bills. In this instance, Senator Dick Durbin in Illinois killed this bill. He has fought this bill. That means that we should be bombarding his door, and his constituents, his voters should know your senator chose not to support a bill that would save children's lives on school campuses and in school activities. He needs to be known as that senator, right? And unless he wants to change that, then he should be known for that. And people need to know that that's who you'll be voting for or against in the next election. Elections do matter. And that reputation needs to be stamped there until he makes a change and decides, I'm ready to support passing a no trafficking zone bill to protect every school and every school-age child throughout the United States of America. We got to do it door by door, name by name, position by position. That's the way we have to make this happen. Elections do matter, and the public's voice, when we unite around a just and righteous cause, has the power to bring change.
Absolutely. And Jacqueline, what are some resources for people who want to find out more information about this legislation, some organizations they can reach out to? Because I feel like this should be the #1 priority in the new Congress. Regardless of who the Speaker of the House is, we need to get this legislation passed.
They can go to No Trafficking Zone at notraffickingzone.org and sign up, fill out a form, and we will send them all of our data and statistics. We're coming out in 2023, specifically because this bill was not passed. on all of our data and the legislation that needs to happen in every city, in every state. We'll also be listing all of our impact partners. What I will say about this bill is there are people on both sides that came together. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Congressman McCall, Senator Cornyn, they did put their parties and their politics aside for people and for humanity. And I think what has to happen in 2023 is that we need to let all elected officials know, no matter what party you are on, if you do not protect children, you are not going to be voted in. Because we want people in power and our leaders to protect children and to put children and their safety over politics and over parties. So people can go to notraffickingzone.org and we can send them our information and let them know just all the impact partners and people that are coming together around the nation to really band together. And as far as Senator Dick Durbin, I want to say this message, because for a senator to have this much power, this bill was in for 9 months. So the Department of Justice, everybody, is 5 elected officials that worked so hard on both sides to get this bill done. He absolutely did have the time to work with everyone. He really chose not to, for whatever those reasons are. And we are hoping that in this next legislation, he will. But if he doesn't, we are just going to get louder and more diligent, and let everybody know that he seems to be a senator that either refuses to recognize this issue or is simply ignoring it.
Well, we're going to make sure that we reach out to Senator Durbin's office, and we want to bring attention to this. Thank you so much, Jacqueline and Bishop Dixon, for bringing this to our attention. All right, last comment to you, Bishop Dixon.
One comment. I want to thank Reverend Jesse Jackson, Bishop Tavis Grant, all of those in Illinois and all around the country. But let me say this. When an athlete commits an egregious act, what does he lose? Not just a position on the football field, a baseball field, a basketball court. Sponsors withdraw their finances. We are going to look at who's sponsoring, who's financing these candidates, these elected officials, and let them know that the person you're backing with your finances is a person who stopped a no trafficking zone bill. Because if you don't support stopping it, you're supporting its continuance. We're going to talk to the sponsors, those campaign financiers, who to make it understand, if your candidate supports trafficking, you're supporting that industry by your support of that person. We've got to get to where the money is. That's where the power changes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bishop Dixon and Jacqueline Alato, for all the work you're doing on this. We'll keep our audience updated and make sure this legislation gets passed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. We're going to go to the panel. We're joined by Attorney A. Scott Bolden, former chair of the National Bar Association, Attorney Joe Richardson, a civil rights attorney, also Monique Presley, legal analyst and host of Make It Make Sense on Instagram Live. How are you guys doing this evening?
Good. Here, doing fine.
All right, Joe, Scott, so let's talk a little bit about this, Scott. Why do you think someone like Senator Durbin is the person holding up this legislation?
Well, he may have some problems with the bill, but I don't think he has problems with the concept of supporting the bill. And I haven't talked to Senator Durbin, and I'm not sure what it is, but having a problem with the bill doesn't mean that he supports sexual trafficking, if you will. Listen, as a former sex crimes prosecutor, as well as someone who has represented companies in the hotel industry, this is a huge issue for hotels and tourism and restaurants, sporting events, if you will, like the Super Bowl, and now it's happening and has been happening in the high schools. I think the minister and your other guests who are deep in the thick of this issue, they need allies, if you will. And they have allies in the hotel industry, I think, that work with law enforcement or work with lawyers like me who do these investigations for private companies, share information, and are 1,000% behind not being part of or setting up or being a situation where sexual traffickers are actually using their facilities to perpetrate this crime. And so I think there are allies out there. There's a big difference between prostitution and pimping and sexual trafficking. You certainly don't have to be a pimp to be in sexual trafficking. And you certainly in sexual trafficking, you don't have to be a pimp. And then the perception of pimps and prostitutes is very different and going on as well. And so as a result, sexual trafficking for young people as well as adults anywhere in this world has to be addressed very differently. You've got to get behind the network, find the money, and then free these young women from trafficking, go after the traffickers, and that is a federal and a state cooperation issue. And so I think we can get there. I like the bill because I think it brings it to a federal level, but most elected officials, most federal officials, when they hear sexual trafficking, they think about some big international network. It doesn't have to be that, or they think about pimps and prostitutes, which is not the case when you're a sexual trafficker or you've been victimized or you're a woman who's being sexually trafficked. It's a very big difference. And so I applaud the legislation. I also applaud your guests that you had on, but they got allies out here and they need to reach out to their allies and push this bill through.
Joe, why do you think that there's not a bigger national conversation on this issue of sex trafficking? Because I think a lot of people think, as Scott said, that when you're talking about sex trafficking, somebody pulls up in a big white van, throws a little girl in the back and drives off. But that's just not the modern interpretation of it. You know, I've talked to young women and worked with young women who had no idea they had even been sex trafficked. They thought they were going on a trip with their boyfriend. And that's you know that they are deep into the world of, as Scott said, prostitution and sex trafficking. What do we need to do to raise awareness about this in all communities, not just Black communities around the country?
We are often, it's good to be with you both, we're often penalized for what we don't know. It's a little bit of a different thing, but I am right now representing a family whose daughter was sexually trafficked right out of the home that she was in. And she was 16, 17 years old. And so often it's with the terminology, right? We feel a certain way. There's a lot of different terms out here in different areas of life, whether you're talking about mental illness, whether you talk about sex trafficking, where the terminology is confusing because they take the terminology and make it into something totally different than a reality that's sitting right in front of them. This bill is really important, like Brother Bolden was saying, because this really addresses a need. You know, most sex trafficking happens, using schools and places where the kids would be, schools, school-related activities. And so therefore, there has to be an increased awareness about what sex trafficking is. Like was said in the interview, a lot of times, these kids are going home and sleeping in their own beds every night. Mom's working 2 jobs. Single parent household doesn't necessarily have to be single parent, but they're not watching as much. They're leaving their 13, 14-year-old kid to be independent, et cetera, and whatever is happening, and they have no idea that their child is coming home every day and being sex trafficked. And so a lot of times, the issue that we have, I think, is with people understanding what sex trafficking or what these other terms actually are, and that it's not just this thing that you've imagined that you're so distant from that can't be happening to your child or somebody that you know just because they go to school and they come home. They're not kidnapped, but they might be kidnapped in their mind. They might be restrained in their activities. They're coming and they're going, and a parent that's busy just trying to make it might not catch it.
You're absolutely correct, and we got to keep an eye on this story but the same mechanism by which bad actors recruit our young boys, 13, 14, 15, into gangs and drug dealing, that's the same mechanism by which they're recruiting our young girls into prostitution and sex trafficking. And we have to be more cognizant of the issue as a community and work with our federal partners to ensure that we are prosecuting people to the fullest extent of the law and passing legislation like this that is necessary to help protect our communities. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be back with more Roland Martin Unfiltered after the break.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
My name is Charlie Wilson.
Hi, I'm Sally Richardson Whitfield.
And I'm Dondre Whitfield.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
The January 6th committee held their final hearings this week, voting unanimously on a criminal referral for President Donald Trump. They have not released their full report yet. It's been delayed and may be released tomorrow. But we wanted to talk a little bit about what this actually means for the political future for President Donald Trump, who has already said this is a kangaroo court, who has already worked to invalidate any of the findings of the January 6th committee. And remember, even with everything that we saw previously, Republicans came within only a couple points of taking control of both the House and the Senate this year, and it's very likely they'll have a strong challenge in 2024, whether it's President Trump or someone else. To talk a little bit about the political future of President Donald Trump, we're joined by Dr. Nola Haynes from Georgetown University. Dr. Haynes, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you also. So, you know, we've been playing this whack-a-mole in this country for the last half decade about whether or not this will be the thing that gets Donald Trump. Is this the thing that will get Donald Trump?
Listen, I'm going to tell you what the nuns used to say and what my papa used to say. Empty wagons make the most noise. Listen, credibility, and homie ain't got none. That's all I have to say. I mean, you know, he's going to make noise. He's going to sell more of his little superhero cards. But at the end of the day, I think, I think that people understand that he's more of a liability than he is helpful on the campaign trail. And to your point, yes, there were some people that came very close to winning, some very tight races. But at the end of the day, it's first past the post. And because I think they had such a large anvil dragging behind their candidates, they didn't get past the post. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I'm really not trying to pay no dust to, his political future or not. I'm more focused on where the country is going and excited for where it's heading.
So what do these charges against President Trump mean, or the criminal referral for President Trump? Can you kind of break down each of the referrals against him and what the Justice Department will need to do in order to actually prove them?
Well, I have a thing where I try not to come across as an expert in areas that I'm not an expert in. So I'm not a lawyer, but I will say, I've taught enough policy and law classes, and I do have a larger understanding of some of these things. And so the first thing that people need to understand, the referral does not mean that the DOJ will automatically will actually prosecute. So that's one thing that people need to understand. I've been kind of explaining that quite a bit today because I feel like there's some confusion when it comes to a referral and when it comes to what the actual action is of the DOJ. And so, these are very strong. This is a very strong referral. You're seeing things like obstruction. You're seeing inciting an insurrection. This is unprecedented. And I think to your earlier question, when we think and talk about the former president, we have to understand he is an extreme outlier. Norms do not apply here. So there's a lot of conversation about precedent, that this is unprecedented, that it will, do damage to the norms in terms of, presidents and how they act and how they behave. No president, not even Richard Nixon, has come close to the amount of damage that the former president has done to the country and to our reputation abroad. There are national security implications here. There are foreign affairs implications here. But, to your specific questions about the 4 charges, the one that stuck out to me was, the January 6th committee went there, and they are really tying him to this insurrection. If for people out there who watched the January 6th committee hearings, season 1, 2, and 3, I was glued to my television having multiple conversations about it. And then recently, their referral, this is serious business. And I still think about Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. It was pretty powerful. And I think that if the DOJ does go ahead and decide to prosecute him on even just one of these charges, he's in big trouble.
Now, speaking of precedents, people have been comparing this to Richard Nixon and his impeachment and the subsequent pardon by President Gerald Ford. And I've heard Geraldo Rivera on Fox News say that, well, even if Trump is convicted, that President Biden should pardon him for the good of the nation to bring the country back together. Do you think that going forward, we may see President Biden pardon President Trump to try to stop his supporters from potentially doing a January 6th style insurrection, but on a national level?
I'm going to try to keep this cute, but as a national security professional, I have got to tell you, I believe that he is a national security risk, and it goes beyond what's going to heal the country are consequences. Like I said, this president was such an outlier. We cannot think about him the same way that we thought about Nixon. Compared to Nixon, Donald Trump is kind of like the teenager. Richard Nixon is like the teenager who stole a pack of gum, compared to some of the crimes that have been leveled against the former president, Donald Trump. I think people really need to stop thinking about this situation in terms of norms or what has happened before. Precedent does not apply. Precedent does not apply in any sense of the word regarding this man. And honestly, in my personal opinion, the only thing that's going to heal this country are consequences, because it's going to do 2 things. Not just give Americans that sense of, no one is above the law. I think that's first and foremost. And it's going to really set an example for those, who might be trying it. And then actually there's a third advantage, as a national security foreign policy person. The damage that was done to our reputation internationally, the Biden-Harris administration has done a great job at trying to repair that. And we have to stand by our own word. If we say no one is above the law, we need to stand on that, because eyes are watching us around the world. A lot of damage was done in the prior administration, and there's a lot of repairing to do. So if we really mean that no one is above the law, you have to go ahead and prosecute this outlier to the fullest extent of the law. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. We cannot think about this man the way we have traditionally thought about presidents. I'm done with that.
Many people said that the impeachment of President Clinton in 1998 cheapened the instance of impeachment, that they knew they didn't have the votes in the Senate to remove him. The public opinion was against the impeachment, but they did it anyway. And then further, Republicans are now saying that, the 2 impeachments of Donald Trump cheapened the institution of impeachment. Do you think that this prosecution will cheapen presidential prosecution going forward, or it simply becomes the new tool that the party out of power uses to interrupt or to investigate or to stop the agenda of the current opposition president? Could we see going forward a January 6th style committee forming for every president whenever there's the other party has control of the House, and then a criminal referral for every president when the other party has control of the House? Will this become the new cycle, the new normal that we see?
And see, this is what's dangerous, and this is what makes this a security risk. The fact that we are talking about this as if this is not an unusual set of circumstances. And I think that, this is one of the things that the Republican Party got very, very wrong. I'm not an advisor in that sort of sense, but I think they should have stuck to what they said after January 6th. If they would have not thought about how he was going to perform on the campaign trail versus saying, you know what, we all watched what happened on January 6th. Some of them were there. They heard what was said on the dais. They saw the tweet from December 19th. This is a very different situation. We cannot normalize this. And to your point, I understand what you're saying. I would think that it's more about fatigue than it is about, using this as a tool to get back at your enemies. By framing it that way is to take away the level of seriousness that this is. To have a person who thinks because you are the president, you can act unilaterally without any consequences, that is the dangerous precedent.
We think of the list of just all-time terrible presidents. There's Andrew Jackson, the Indian removal at the Trail of Tears. There's Andrew Johnson, curtailing Reconstruction after the Civil War. Of course, Richard Nixon and Watergate. There's Woodrow Wilson, one of the most racist presidents in American history. George W. Bush killed upwards of 1 million Iraqi civilians for literally no apparent reason. What does it say that we are prosecuting President Trump more thoroughly than any of these other presidents who arguably have done far worse things to humanity and killed far more people than President Trump for essentially, as his people would say, having a protest at the Capitol?
A protest at the Capitol, I think that is such a horrible way to kind of demean what happened on January 6th. People died. Police officers were injured, traumatic. They still suffer from trauma to a large degree. And as a person who sits here, who had more than a dozen family members die from COVID, we can have a conversation about that. I would not demean, the loss of life under that administration. And also, you have to take into account the role that social media context plays a large part in this. You have to think about the sign of the times. We wouldn't have found out about Watergate if Richard Nixon's vanity project of recording everyone did not exist. Technology plays a large part into where we are today. So because of social media, because of the way that we have access to information, the way that information can be retrieved from cell phones and videos and things like that, we are living in very different times. And I think without contextualizing the rest of the presidents, because yes, you can line them up, today is a very different day. And because we have access to different types of information, different types of intelligence, it absolutely makes sense to me in the age of social media that, we have more access to some of the things that the former president has done. And I just want to say one last thing. I was home in New Orleans for Mardi Gras in 2020. And that is right before COVID hit. And one of the things that the mayor of New Orleans said over and over and over is that she got the green light to go ahead with Mardi Gras, that COVID, that it was fine. It was not fine. I lost 13 family members, and I need people to understand, to go ahead and say that, this president lost more lives, that president, we're talking about lost lives domestically. And not to dismiss any lives lost foreign, but we're talking about domestically. And I think that last comment kind of really upset me. So that's why I'm kind of going back to it, because I don't want to disrespect anyone who has lost people during COVID, including my family.
You're absolutely correct. And kind of just the last question before we leave. What will it mean if the Congress does not or the DOJ does not prosecute President Trump for this? We've already seen the Trumpites, Carrie Lake, Herschel Walker, others denying their elections. What will happen if we do not hold President Trump accountable for this?
It would be a huge missed opportunity. I think it would tell the United States and the rest of the world that, yes, presidents are above the law, that, yes, they operate with immunity and they can operate like monarchs. And I think that that's the dangerous precedent. Like I said, when we started this conversation, that's the precedent we should be worried about, the only one. We need to hold everyone accountable. No one is above the law.
Thank you so much. Dr. Nola Haynes, Georgetown University, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's bring the panel back in. So, Scott, what do you think is going to happen with the DOJ? We've seen Merrick Garland be cagey and very measured when it comes to prosecution of the president, even the statements on prosecution of the former president. Do you think this will actually result in actual criminal charge against President Trump?
Well, that remains to be seen. The criminal referrals from the House HR report is relevant, probative, and material but it won't be dispositive of what DOJ does. DOJ is investigating these same underlying facts and prosecuting the insurrectionists already. They have a special prosecutor investigating Trump's conduct in the January 6th insurrection, and DOJ will accept that material, review it, but review it in regard to what they have covered already in their investigation. How does it fit within their set of facts that they have? And then politically, remember this, the DOJ early on in this January 6th committee investigation was not cooperating with the committee. They didn't want the committee formed at one point, and then it got formed, it was moving forward, and then the committee would not share its information with DOJ. So the politics between the committee and DOJ have not been as clean as you would think and cooperative as you think they should be. Now that the report is done and they're now turning over this material, it will be added to the investigatory results DOJ has. But in the end, DOJ, if they bring charges against Donald Trump, and I anticipate that they will, at least there's enough there for them to do it, I anticipate that they will, then DOJ will bring its own charges and explain what its evidence is at a press conference, and then they'll have to go prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt in federal court. That's super important, because if he's acquitted, then all the work that has gone in with the committee and DOJ will be for naught. But more importantly, it sends an awful message, optics and substantively, an awful message in regard to presidential misconduct and the lack of holding president's bad behavior for accountability purposes. So this isn't over. It's over in Congress, but it's not over with DOJ.
Joe, what do you think, which of these charges do you think are actually the strongest? If you put your prosecutor hat on, if you were to pick one of these charges to go forward on, what do you think is the biggest and best slam dunk that you think the DOJ would be able to actually prosecute him on? Because we all know often prosecution is throwing spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. But if the DOJ brings weak charges and President Trump's able to come out of it saying, look, only one of the 4 charges stuck, I think he actually comes out stronger. What do you think will be the one kind of gravamon that the DOJ hangs their hat on?
I think it really depends on whether or not the people that are evaluating this case can actually get out of their head. In my mind, inciting an insurrection is the clearest. I think it's crystal clear, but it's so unusual. It never happens. It's very, very rarely used. It hasn't been used since the Civil War. And if you can't get around that notion, how could it be so clear that something that hasn't been, prosecuted for 150 years or so is being prosecuted now? And should we actually connect to that from the DOJ standpoint? Should we actually bring this? How are people going to respond to this? That can be preclusive by itself, the lack of familiarity. But the irony is that I think that that's the clearest. That's the most obvious example. That's the most obvious manifestation of what actually happened. You can take his words. You can take cell phone messages and text messages. The special counsel who has really put his foot on the gas once he got involved last month is really taking this down the road. And by the way, Pete Aguilar, somebody I know, he's my congressman. I've been in the room when he's at fundraisers talking about the fact that they have staffs of former DOJ lawyers, former prosecutors. They're putting this thing together the right way, actually. And so the question becomes whether or not people can get their mind wrapped around the notion that this is so unusual, but that doesn't mean that this is not necessary for consideration for a criminal conviction, et cetera, because we haven't convicted anybody else. And to the point that the doctor just made a few minutes ago, the things that happened with COVID, the incompetence with which this presidency was gone about should be criminal in and of itself. But that's not what they're bringing. He killed a lot of people. He helped a lot of people die. He sped a lot of people's demise through what happened with COVID, or what should I say, what didn't happen. But the fact of the matter is, the inciting of the resurrection, frankly, is the clearest. That's what we've been talking about. The January 6th committee is about what? I keep saying the resurrection, but the insurrection. And so that ought to be the clearest, but because it's so unusual, and because people may be unfamiliar, and because of the underlying notion, will 1 out of the 12 people or the 10 people that are on the jury actually be connected to this underlying thing where they don't want to believe that a president ought to be convicted because they think it sends the wrong message. So you've got a lot of things. You've got to do what's right. But I think the unfamiliarity here may be the biggest obstacle, even though that may be the clearest charge.
You know, I think this is a very tough decision. I would not want to be in Merrick Garland's shoes for this, especially when you have all the other investigations into President Trump. This is absolutely something we have to monitor because, you know, if you do this incorrectly, you convict Donald Trump on one count, then Don Jr. announces he's running for president. He wins on a platform of I'm going to pardon my dad. He pardons his dad, makes him vice president, resigns. We still got President Trump again. You can put nothing past the Trump era of American politics. We're going to be back after the break. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
My name is Charlie Wilson.
Hi, I'm Sally Richardson Whitfield.
And I'm Dondre Whitfield.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
I think we all know the gentrification, destruction of black communities has become a epidemic around the country. You can look at Oscarville in the state of Georgia. You can look at the history of the interstate highway system. Black communities have continuously been victims to eminent domain and construction companies coming in and destroying what we have spent so long building. Right now, a Louisiana parish is fighting to keep a construction company from building a large grain plant near a residential neighborhood. The Descendants Project, a local Louisiana nonprofit, is helping the residents of St. John's Baptist Parish battle Greenfield, Louisiana LLC. Greenfield is a Colorado-based company seeking to construct a large grain silo or grain terminal. The local Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed a decision that the residents could move forward to nullify the zoning ordinance. To help explain this new development, we're joined by Dr. Joy Banner, co-founder of the Descendants Project. Dr. Banner, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Can you talk a little bit about this case and how we got to this point? Because I've worked with many families and many organizations trying to stop these, and it's a David and Goliath type of situation often. How do we get to this place where we're already in federal court trying to stop this grain terminal from being built?
Yeah, well, the reason why we're here in the first place is because 30 years ago, the parish president of St. John the Baptist Parish took a bribe and illegally changed the zoning from residential to industrial. That parish president was sent to federal prison for 5 years, but the zoning stayed on the books for 30 years, and now Greenfield is taking advantage, of those laws. St. John the Baptist Parish, who the lawsuit is against, we're suing the parish to actually have the zoning change off the books, and Greenfield stepped in and intervened and is now, part of that lawsuit. But the good news is that, like you said before, the courts at the district level affirmed that the case could continue. Greenfield stepped in and actually appealed the decision, trying to dismiss the case again. And the appellate court agreed that, again, the case could continue. But really what is very shocking, and, I guess maybe being in Louisiana, maybe it shouldn't be, and the fact that this is Cancer Rally, and we're in the environmental and health crisis that we are, maybe people aren't shocked, but it's just the way that our elected officials, understanding how dangerous this grain terminal is. When we say grain, sometimes people don't have an understanding of how dangerous these facilities are. They have been characterized as more explosive in some cases than dynamite factories, right? And so we would have this huge, massive facility that's sitting right outside of our backyards, right, outside of our doors. And the fact that, no one at our public official level, even at our state legislative level, no one is concerned enough about, the danger, and the fact that this would pump out 130 more tons of pollution into an area that's already called Cancer Alley. We have asthma rates that are twice as high as the states and is twice as high as the countries. But the way that our elected officials, again, have refused to put us on the agenda, we have tried to engage with our legislators, and they've ignored us.
And talk a little bit about why the elected officials have acted in this way, because it seems like this should be a political solution. That you have elected officials, you go there, you ask for a change in the zoning, and then if they don't do it, you vote them out. But we see often that this is not the case. We had a case or a situation here in Atlanta probably a decade ago where I was the lawyer, and we were trying to stop a zoning ordinance, and we found out that these construction companies had been buying people Cadillacs and shoes and vacations and everything else. Talk a little bit about why the political solution has fallen apart.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately because the way that industries work is they engage with our elected officials first. They get the approval, they get whatever relationships, whatever has been promised, they get that worked out first. And then these public officials, instead of doing what's in the best interest of the public, they're instead acting as an arm, an extension of these companies. And so for us, the most shocking, for us even involves our port of South Louisiana. This is bizarre, what we found out. They have actually stepped in. That's the port, which is a board that is appointed by the governor. It's a public serving board. It's a political subdivision. But on paper, essentially, the port has agreed to buy the Greenfield grain terminal, at least on paper, so that Greenfield will get a $209 million tax deal over 30 years. So that money, instead of it going to the schools, instead of it going to, resources, infrastructure that we need, resources for flooding protection, for our senior citizen community, that would be wiped off the books for them. And this is done in full participation and collaboration with our Port of South Louisiana. They've done this with some really suspicious, in my opinion, some very questionable tactics that seem to be in violation of open meeting law. So it's not publicly, available for us to even see. Has been done with little documentation, has been done with little record keeping. It's amazing that, a company could be allowed to get $200 million of taxes essentially wiped off the books, yet we don't even have a paper trail. We don't even know how the decision was made. So again, it is our elected officials, our leaders being more loyal to these companies and let's be, probably to what they're getting from these companies rather than being concerned about citizens.
You talked a little bit about the environmental and health effects of putting a terminal like this near a historic Black community, because it's not just the terminal being itself. It is the hundreds of 18-wheelers that are going to be coming through that area every day, spewing pollution and diesel fuel. We talk about the processing of grain. If you get a chance for the viewers, just look at the Lebanon grain terminal when it exploded a few years ago with the force of nearly an atomic bomb. It nearly destroyed that port, because once grain is oxidized, all it needs is an ignition source and pressure being inside of a silo, and you effectively have something the equivalent of the Oklahoma City bomb, which was an ammonium nitrate bomb. In addition, when grain ferments, it leaks dangerous chemicals into the water supply, the groundwater supply. Talk a little about the health effects that people are worried about and why it's so important to stop this from being constructed.
Yes, and thank you for being so informed about the dangers of grain. But yes, like you said, it takes a layer of dust as thin as a sheet of paper to be dangerous enough to explode. There was a grain explosion and fire 2 days ago in Michigan. They explode all the time, and the really frightening part about it is that in a lot of those cases, you can't determine why exactly did these grain terminals explode. So yes, I mean, they explode all the time. Also, just the air that we would be breathing in. So we're breathing in all of the fumigants, the fertilizers, all of the chemicals that are being used on the grain. The dust itself contains pieces of metal fragments, which is sometimes the reason why these grain terminals explode, because it scrapes against metal and it causes an explosion to happen. So yes, we would be breathing in things like excrement from animals, from dead insect parts, dead rodent parts. So all of that, again, in Cancer Alley, in region where we have been begging, pleading, with our government officials, with people in charge of protecting us, to come in and help us, right? And we have, studies that show over and over again that environmental racism is real, that Black communities, historic Black communities like mine, whose, people are descended from the plantations that still surround us. And in which case, many of these plants are literally on the grounds of plantations. That's the reason why our burial grounds are in danger, including, burial grounds at the Greenfield site. That's why we, are often targeted. So again, we are just pleading, for our elected officials to step in. But even if they don't, we've taken the responsibility as private citizens, which should not have to be our responsibility. These elected officials have the power to do something, and they don't. But the good news is that the work of communities like mine, we actually have an EPA investigation into permitting, including one of Greenfield's permits. So it's an unfortunate situation, but we're going to continue fighting. We have no choice but to fight, and we're in it for the long haul.
How has the federal government been either assisting or have they not been assisting in this? Daniel Blackman's of the EPA for the Southeast region. Have they worked with you to try to determine how to stop this? Have your congressional representatives been responsive? Because we want them to find a solution to this, not in addition to bringing attention to the problem.
No, our legislators, our representatives and senators, unfortunately, have been very disengaged. And, these are Louisiana, predominantly African-American for this region. And it has been really, very disturbing, but more disappointing, I should say, that our elected officials, I mean, we've reached out to some and they've not, engaged with us, or they say they're going to meet and they don't, or they know we've put this story out, put this, the situation out in the media enough, and we are not getting any engagement or any outreach. What happens in Louisiana, as it does in a lot of places, is that it becomes an economic development. or these industries come in and they use jobs, as a reason why they promise us jobs. And they make us think that we can't get jobs or we can't get economic development that doesn't require Black communities and Black people to be sacrificed. This is not a sacrifice zone. And we can attract industries that, have community input. We can go out and we can find, things that work for our community. But we have a very rich parish. But if you look at, the resources, the infrastructure, the problems that we have in our parish, it's a lack of good governance at the state and at the local level. That's why we have the situation that we have.
Well, we're glad we have people on the ground like you bringing attention to this, and I think it's crucial for folks to just think about this. When grain ferments, it turns into alcohol. That's where liquor comes from. If you put fire to liquor, you get an explosion. That is what putting a giant grain silo into a community does. You're putting a literal bomb into the middle of a Black community. Thank you so much, Doctor, for all the work that you're doing and for bringing attention to this. We're going to make sure we follow up on this to make sure the people of that community are protected, and hopefully we can bring in our federal officials to put some pressure to move this to a less populated zone. If it was a good idea, put it by the rich people and see what they have to say about it. Thank you so much for joining.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We're going to be back after the break on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
I am on screen, and I am representing what a Black man is to the entire world that's going to see this. And this might be the only Black man, a representation of a Black man that they see.
Right.
So I am responsible.
Right.
For how they see Black men. And it's my responsibility to, if I am not playing an upstanding, honorable, someone with a strong principle or moral core, to make sure that this character is so specific,
right,
that it is him, not Black men. And I wish that more actors would realize how important their position is as an actor of color, playing people of color on screen. Because there are people that see us all over the world in these different images that we portray. And not everyone knows Black people to know,
yes,
that's not all.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Eric Nolan.
I'm Shantae Moore.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Today on Black and Missing, Talia Lovett has been missing from her Smithfield, Rhode Island home since December 14th, 2022. The 16-year-old is 5'7" tall, weighs about 160 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information about Talia Lovett is urged to call the Smithfield, Rhode Island Police Department at 404-231-25500. And we absolutely want to make sure that we bring attention to our young people who are missing, that are not being articulated about and paid attention to on national news. So if you have any information in that area, please be sure to reach out to the Smithfield, Rhode Island Police Department. Right now, 7:30 tonight, we're going to see a live address by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the Congress of the United States of America. Today, he met with President Joe Biden and also congressional leadership. This is in the wake of nearly $40 billion being pledged in aid to the Ukrainian government in the continued fight against Russia. And this funding has been flowing all year. And many of us who support the Ukrainians and want what's best for them, and of course want to stop Russian aggression, but we do have this question of, where y'all getting all this money at? all of a sudden. And if you look at what's been happening during the lame duck session of Congress, we've seen continuously bipartisan agreement after bipartisan agreement. We have the Respect for Marriage Act that was signed into law last week by President Biden, which codified both gay marriage and interracial marriage into federal law upon the threat of it being overturned by the Supreme Court in the wake of the Dobbs decision. After the Dobbs decision, we saw an executive order protecting abortion rights on the federal level nationwide. Just this week, we saw a $1.7 trillion with a T. We're beyond billions. We're into trillions. $1 billion federal budget for 2023 that looks like it's going to pass with bipartisan support. The 4,000-page bill was introduced to Congress at 1:23 a.m. with only 48 hours to read through the bill before it will be put up to a vote, and it's expected to pass with bipartisan support. All these things are all well and good, but I'm down in Atlanta, and it was just a month ago that we had every Democratic elected official in the country at Spelman, Morehouse, and Clark Atlanta's homecoming doing the Dougie and doing the stanky leg, talking about how much black folks were important and the backbone of the Democratic Party, how crucial it was for black people to save democracy. But then when it's time to spend $1.7 trillion, all of a sudden, nobody's doing the Dougie to tell us what we're getting out of the $1.7 trillion. Has anybody come to your neighborhood and done the stanky leg to explain where that $1.7 trillion is going to go? So we've seen a little bit of the breakdown of the bill. As I said, it was 4,000 pages, and clearly nobody can read that in 24 hours. But it looks like we're going to be spending $458 billion on the defense budget for 2023. To put that into perspective, the Biden administration only asked for $813 billion for the defense spending bill, and Congress went ahead and added another $40 billion to that. This is more than the next 5 nations on earth combined. America has donated more money to Ukraine's defense than the entire Russian GDP for the year 2020. When we talk about spending, if you have a $1.7 trillion budget and $850 billion of that's going to defense, that means the entire rest of the country has to live off of basically about the same budget as the U.S. defense industry has to. So why is it that we get bipartisan support, bipartisan agreement when it comes to an $856 billion defense spending bill? We all know exactly why. As Gil Scott-Heron said, it's the military and the monetary coming together whenever it's necessary, turning this planet into a cemetery. It is the military-industrial complex that is able to bribe our congresspeople with everything from jobs, everything from campaign donations to lobbying to ensure that the defense budget is never decreased. Think about the fact that we are fighting around the edges to get things such as early childhood education, K through 12 education, free lunch programs in communities, infrastructure to rebuild roads and schools and bridges and airports. We fight like cats and dogs 300-ish days a year to fight over those mere scraps in our federal budget. But the defense industry doesn't have to do any of this. If you look at the F-35 jet program, that is the state-of-the-art fighter jet that's being built currently, just that one jet program costs over $1 trillion to develop, and we have not seen it be used in action yet. It literally has never shot anything down, and frankly, we have seen more crashes of the F-35 in recent years than we've seen actual use of it in combat. That's $1 trillion that no one has any ability to ask questions about. You look at the B-2 bomber program. We're talking about $2 billion per airplane for a strategic bomber that really has no role in modern warfare. So much so that they're now replacing it with a new $1 billion bomber, the B-21 Raider, which will be coming, which was just displayed by the Defense Department in the last couple weeks. Oh, are we picking on the Air Force for acquisitions? Well, you can look at the Navy. They're presenting the brand new aircraft carrier, which costs $13 billion per aircraft carrier, has been in development for over a decade, but we still aren't using them because the electromagnetic catapults that they are replacing the steam catapults with don't work. So we are spending $13 billion on aircraft carriers with parts that still don't work. And note, America has 13 currently in service aircraft carriers. The rest of the world has 3. When you talk about super carriers, China has one, Russia has one that's currently in dry dock, and France has one. The rest of the world has no ability to match this, and we have 13, so that we can quote unquote project power internationally. If you want to go further into the defense build budget, there's money in there for Space Force, because we have to make sure that we are fighting in space, apparently. Until we can get our defense spending under control, there's no way that we can tame the $31.5 trillion debt that the United States is currently in, that we have no intention of paying down. We still have not paid down the Trump tax cuts from 2017, and Democrats have made no efforts to repeal those same tax cuts. We still have not paid off the Bush tax cuts from the first Bush administration. We haven't paid off the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. But whenever it comes time to balance the budget, we never go to the defense industry and ask, can they cut that $856 billion budget? And when you add in Veterans Affairs and administrative costs, it's well over $1 trillion that we're actually spending on defense on a yearly basis. But we want to cut school lunch. We want to cut aid to single families. We want to cut any social program, because Lord knows we can't ask the rich people to pay more money. We can't ask the defense industry to take less money. We have to balance the budget on the backs of the poor. So those same Congress people, those same officials who are doing the Dougie and doing the stanky leg saying how important black folks are, I think it's a reasonable question to ask them right now. But where are you at when it comes to doing things that the community needs? Because I feel like if we have $800 billion to spend on the defense industry, then we should have a few $1 billion to spend on reparations per year to African Americans who built this country and even allowed you to have something to be defending in the first place. Until we repair what's been done to black folks in this country, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to take us seriously when we're talking about spreading democracy around the world. I want to bring the panel in on this, Scott Bolden, Joe Richardson. Scott, why do you think we are passing this $1.7 trillion spending bill with no public debate, no public disclosure, 48 hours to read a 4,000-page bill, and all of a sudden Republicans and Democrats can get along? Can't get along on voting rights, can't get along on criminal justice reform, but when it's time to pass a secret bill during Christmas when nobody is paying attention, all of a sudden everybody's all chummy and can get along.
Well, you said a lot. I don't know where to begin. But let me say this. Democracy costs. It costs $1 trillion to protect this life of democracy that we enjoy, the First Amendment, the Constitution. And Democrats and Republicans will always agree on that. You don't want us to be less safe, do you? And the costs for military might are the costs for military might. I don't disagree with your supposition or your proposition, but these are the political realities that we may have 13 carriers and the others have one carrier. We need to keep it like that because our democracy is always under threat. And this is the greatest country in the history of this country, in the history of the world. And so $2 billion a year for reparations is a drop in the bucket for black people. It certainly should have, but the reason both sides, Democrats and Republicans, can't agree is because America struggles with the race question. And poor people, it costs a lot of money to take care of poor people. America doesn't want to recognize the poor people. We're a capitalistic society, and so we recognize the capitalist, if you will. I mean, you're talking about retribution, wealth retribution, economic retribution in this country, and it's going to take a lot more fighting in order to do that. It makes all the sense in the world, but the reality is our elected officials, black, white, yellow, or brown, believe in this military-industrial complex. They believe in it, right? And they vote on it. And so they may not have read the bill, but this bill has been negotiated for some time. If you don't vote on this bill in a positive way, then the government's going to shut down and you'll have a financial disaster in the private sector and public sector. So that's why it's going to pass, and that's why it makes sense.
But Scott, why didn't they say that, 3-4 weeks ago when they were down here at homecoming doing the stanky leg and Dougie, talking about how important it was to defend America? Why didn't they say, well, we need you to get out here and vote so we can have a majority so we can pass $1 trillion in defense spending and tax cuts for rich people? They didn't mention any of that. They were doing the side to side, doing the little Beyonce dance and stuff. Why weren't they doing that?
I was at Morehouse homecoming. Who did you see doing the stanky leg? I didn't see anybody doing the stanky leg. What are you talking about? They were doing a whole lot of...
Kerry Washington were right there at homecoming doing the stanky leg and the Dougie. I'm not making it up. I was there.
But Kerry Washington can do whatever she wants to do as far as I'm concerned. But uprightness and beauty. But here's the deal. That's not the only vote that's ever going to be taken in Congress. Not really fair to say, well, you're doing the stanky leg and we need black people. They need black people to vote for them to keep control of the Senate and to keep it close in the House. So that's not really fair. I mean, Robert, I get what you're saying. And philosophically, it makes all the sense in the world. I wish it wasn't like that. But I also think that it's just not realistic. It should be, but it's not. And until we become a country of color in 2043, and that culture changes, and I predict that it won't change. That if we were a country of color and the majority of the Senate and the House were still black, protecting democracy at all costs and military might is always going to be a bipartisan issue and always going to be very supported by those who are going to be voting to protect our democracy and protect us.
Joe, I'm going to go to you, and then we also want to bring in Pastor Wright to this conversation so we can have a more well-rounded discussion. But Joe, after the...
You're doing a good enough job, if you ask me.
well, look,
you're doing a good enough job.
Look, after the midterms, we said, well, we can't. The whole year we've been saying we can't have any bipartisanship. Don't have any bipartisanship. Mitch McConnell says the era of bipartisanship is over. But as soon as we saw there was a danger of these Republicans losing their white women, they passed a Respect for Marriage Act on a bipartisan basis. They wanted to make sure that Clarence Thomas ain't going to lose Jenny. Kamala ain't going to lose Doug. So they can come together for things like that. When it comes time to line their pockets and spend $1.7 trillion in the dead of night while y'all are eating Christmas dinner, they can come together on that. So why is it we can't get bipartisan agreement on voting rights, on criminal justice reform, on not shooting black people? Explain to me why we should not demand those sorts of things if all of a sudden we can have bipartisan agreements on these other issues.
Not inconsistent with the previous point. The fact is all of those issues that they should be progressing on, you have to make an acknowledgement in order to do that. To fix something, you have to recognize something is wrong. To do reparations, you've got to realize and acknowledge that you made a mistake, and you've been making a mistake, and it's systemic, and it's widespread, and to reverse it, it's going to hurt the people that benefited from you making the mistake, and folk don't want to go that far, okay? And so, again, the country is changing. It's changing quickly. And those issues that you're talking about are issues that morally and legally we ought to be doing something about. But it gets to the heart of this whole change thing, of this whole being outnumbered by people that don't think like us and people that don't look like us, at least don't look like us. We think very alike more than we would acknowledge, when we get together and have conversations and that type of thing. So there have to be a recognition made there, right? And yeah, there is this military industrial complex. That's why we want to feel safe. We want to be safe. People, black folks in the military would support that. But to your point, what we'd have to do, or black people that feel safer, being able to say this is the greatest country in the world. I absolutely believe that there are things that we have done that no one has done. But, being the leader of the free world and all of these other things, there's no election to be the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, to be considered the greatest. Oh, we took a survey, and this is how it came. There was this objective evaluation of what makes you great and who's the greatest. Well, it starts off with who's the most powerful, right? It starts off with who's the most mighty, right? And then that ends up being our starting point, and we kind of go from there. But to your point, there has to be some priority for things that need to happen as well, things that protect us and that help us in our existence. It didn't help me necessarily that I'm in the greatest country in the world if I get pulled over because I got on a hoodie and I'm driving my $50,000 Acura. It didn't necessarily help that time in that moment, right? And hopefully that doesn't happen where now, we go and we're doing the, Pledge of Allegiance and singing the Star Spangled Banner, but y'all forgot the second verse wasn't written for us. And so what we have to do is continue to be politically engaged, right? And so, our answer to that question, Robert, has to be, why is it that our moms, our dads, and our kids and our family and our community isn't keeping our hands to the plow here in terms of saying, okay, I voted for you, but here's what I want to happen from a budget standpoint. Don't leave us out. Don't leave early childhood education out. Don't leave, solidifying and confirming the existence and the legitimacy of Medicare out. Don't leave the expansion of ACA out, et cetera. And so we have to stay on it. We can't just do, that every 2-year thing, every 4-year thing, even though the politicians try to do it that way. So don't just have them come out and talk to us and say what they say, and then we vote for them. Let's follow them back, figuratively, if not literally, to Washington, to our state capitals, to our other places. And so we stay on it. Just say, okay, you want to be military industrial, but we're not going to lose on this. You have to do this, you have to do this, and you have to do this. Otherwise, we will vote you out. And that's why voting rights and voting, regardless of what's happening with those rights, is so, so important.
Pastor Wright, in the 1960s, Malcolm X said, you put them first, they put you last, because they think of you as chumps, political chumps. And so when you have all these groups coming out, they had strippers doing "Get Your Booty to the Poll" for the midterms here in Georgia. Like I said, they had all the rappers coming out. They have all the entertainers and everybody else coming out saying you got to get to the polls. But then when it's time to spend the money, I don't see that same thing happening. This is why you got to get your money up. This is why you got to get paid up front on things. Because we saw an executive order on abortion after the Dobbs decision. We saw the Respect for Marriage Act. Because remember, a decade ago, the idea of gay marriage was the most abhorrent thing in American politics. It was a bridge too far. Even President Obama was talking about domestic partnerships as opposed to full marriage rights. But you get bipartisan support from Christian evangelical Republicans on the Respect for Marriage Act, but somehow we can't get criminal justice reform done. We can't get an executive order on voting rights. You're not getting any of the money out of this $1.7 trillion is getting spent. Make this make sense to us, and what can we do going forward to not have the same thing happen in 2024?
I'm still stuck on you talking about the bipartisan support and left and the right and the $1 trillion budget and the folks on both sides down there doing a Dougie and a stink leg. And I'm trying to figure out which Republican folks was down there, first of all, and who of them would know which of one of those dancers you're talking about. So I'm trying to catch up because I'm stuck there.
There's a video of Herschel Walker on stage, absolutely, doing some kind of little step and fetch it. So
that don't
it's
count.
both sides.
That one don't count. Nope. We ain't playing that. That don't count. Sorry. You have to come with another better one than that. I'm sorry. But the reality is, when you look at these things and you look at these bills and you look at where it does not appear we are a priority, it is because we are not. We don't write big checks to candidates. We don't do a lot of the things that our elected leaders value to be able to continue to be our elected leaders. So until we find another voice that has enough heat behind it to be able to make them understand and recognize we're serious, and we're going to be serious not just with our words, but with our votes, we are not going to see ourselves as a priority in these bills that are being passed. The reality is, I don't care which party you belong to, but if you want to cut taxes and you want to talk about lowering the amount of money that you have to, quote, give out to folks, and help folks and all the social, this, that, and the other, then fix education. Level the playing field on education so that folks have a better chance of being able to continue their education and get a job where they can actually live, not just survive. So when we talk about, not being a priority, we have to make sure we understand the importance and what the priorities are that we have to advocate for and never ceasing, period.
Look, I think this is a conversation that we're going to have to continue going forward. I think tomorrow we're going to do a full breakdown after we have a chance to read through that 4,000-page bill with the $1.7 trillion in spending to see exactly where it's going. But I recommend for people make some demands before you cast your vote. Make sure that these people understand, like, hey, you know, when they come to you at church and they say, look, I'd love to have your vote, pull them in real close and say, you know, you gotta pay what you weigh on these things. And these are the things I'm expecting. Very specific. Because trust me, if you go to that LGBTQ community, they're making sure you know I expect a vote on the Respect for Marriage Act in exchange for this vote. If you go to the feminist community, I'm expecting something on Dobbs in order to get this vote. We're the only ones that you send Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion out to do some dances, and then we run into the polls without making any demands. We got to make those demands up front before giving out the vote. That is the currency that we have, and we're operating in a pluralistic society. We're going to talk. We're going to be back after the break. You're listening, or you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches! Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig? Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
What's up, y'all? I'm Will Packard.
Hello, I'm Bishop T.D.J.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Going to hit some headlines. The Mississippi NAACP is suing the state over the Mississippi's legislative redistricting plan. If you guys remember, in this year's midterm elections, Democrats in large part lost the House majority because of redistricting. Redistricting in Florida basically created 5 Republican seats out of thin air. We saw this around the country. The Mississippi legislature has passed a new redistricting plan that significantly dilutes the percentage of the percentage of power that each vote of Black residents have in their district. Because of this, Mississippi NAACP and 5 Black residents have filed a federal lawsuit challenging the new district scheduled to be used in 2023 election. This comes only weeks before the qualifying deadline of February the 1st. Remember, voter suppression takes many forms. I think often when people talk about voter suppression, they're thinking about Bull Connor sitting outside of the polls with hoses and dogs stopping people from voting. In reality, there are various schemes and tools being used, particularly with the weakening of the Voting Rights Act in 2014 and the continued action by states in order to push and make it more difficult for Black people to be able to exercise the franchise. So we're, of course, going to pay attention to that case going forward. Also, news anchor goes on a rant on Newsmax about the lack of white American Girl dolls. Can't make this up. Newsmax host Rob Finnerty had an on-air meltdown over the lack of white American Girl dolls. Here's what he had to say if we have the clip.
How long has this been going on with American Girls? I took my 6-year-old to the store in Rockefeller Center, like the American Girl experience. And, you know, typically girls that are into American Girls, they get a doll that looks like them. And you can get an outfit that, you know, so you can match your doll. We were in there, and my daughter's just a cute little 6-year-old white girl. We couldn't find anybody that looked like my daughter. It was the whole place. It was like wokeified.
Oh my God! Oh, the poor white people, they can't find no white dolls. Oh Lord Jesus, what are they gonna do? However, will a young 16-year-old white girl find any representation of herself in America, where literally everything that you see is about the protection of little white girls? When you're playing video games as a kid, Super Mario is rescuing the blonde-haired, blue-eyed princess from the castle. When you watch movies going back to the 1920s and 30s, they're rescuing the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl from King Kong on top of the building, tied to train tracks. Every single piece of media, the eternal victim in America is the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman. But yet and still, this host seems to think that he is being oppressed and discriminated against, because this is the new white victimization culture that we see happening. You see this often on Tucker Carlson and other forms of white media. When they talk about woke and wokeism, Ron DeSantis in Florida saying this is where woke comes to die, they consider anything that is an attack on white supremacy to be quote-unquote woke. In their minds, any attacks on white supremacy are a fundamental attack on America. America and white supremacy are interchangeable to these people, and they see any efforts to diversify or to update or to recognize anybody besides cisgendered, straight white people in this country to be quote-unquote woke. I'm gonna bring the panel back in on this, because sometimes you gotta stop and just laugh at people. Pastor Wright, do you think that there's an issue where little white girls are not getting enough attention and not enough representation?
Stop picking on that poor man. He's just trying to find something for his baby to look like her. You should sympathize. You know what that struggle is like, doggone it. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I have a granddaughter, and it wasn't, when she was born, it was still difficult to find dolls that looked like her. So I understand that it is special for folks that feel like they shouldn't have that problem to have that problem. And I think, quite honestly, the American Girl doll gave me a real good idea. I think we should try. I think, just like folks are having trouble finding the American Girl doll that represents what their children like, we should start having other folks get pulled over in hoodies driving their cars too. Because I feel like if we could, you know, you got to walk a mile in people's shoes. And maybe if folks could understand some of the issues and the problems, there'd be a little bit more sympathy and understanding, and we could really meet somewhere in the middle. So I think that doll situation is giving me a good idea. We ought to start stopping white people in hoodies.
Yeah, you know, they want all the benefits, but none of the detriments. It's strange how that works all of a sudden. Scott, do you think we should sympathize with this man and his, you know, his plight, and maybe send him some little white dolls so he can feel better about himself?
We can empathize with him, because black people have been looking for black dolls and black toys that look like them, and the power of that has been researched and determined over the years, not only in the media, but scientific studies. We can empathize with him, but part of me wants to say, welcome to the struggle. Finally, after 400 years, your whiteness is being challenged by corporate America and the American doll. Well, here's another question, though. What's wrong with his daughter buying a black doll or a Chinese doll or a Thai doll, because they're all girls in America? Why isn't he celebrating diversity? And maybe he was there when they were out of white dolls. So why is he on national TV arguing or lamenting the fact that his little white girl couldn't find another little white doll that looks like her, as if buying a black doll was somehow going to be detrimental to her, or maybe it was compared to what he's teaching her at home about her white privilege. Don't know. But buy a black doll or Hispanic doll or Chinese doll. She'll be okay. She may even learn about diversity and maybe, Lord knows, find a black friend or a brown friend, and God forbid, bring her home because she's got a brown or black doll.
You know, I think it's very reasonable. He's afraid that she's going to get this little black doll and she's going to take her home. And next thing you know, little Sally's going to be, little Sally going to be in there seasoning chicken and then, all of a sudden have some rhythm doing the little Beyonce dance and everything. You can't expose children to that. Next story.
Hold on, Robert. When she does that, if she buy the black doll, she's going to bring Jamal home in a couple of years. And it's going to be over. It's going to be completely over.
We don't want the black and brown dolls to lead to Jamal coming home. Is that what we're saying?
Apparently, that's his fear.
God.
I think that's what's going to happen. All of a sudden, you buy her an American Girl doll, then she's seasoning chicken, cooking greens, making cornbread, and Jamal at your house. That's how
God
it works.
forbid.
That's what they fear.
God forbid. And Jamal going to be looking at his wife like, "How you doing? How you doing?"
Y'all mad. But it might help to, that understanding and empathy and us, finding our way to the middle a little bit more.
Maybe. But it's just amazing that they spend time on that, on Newsmax,
he helps
as conservative as they are.
I think he helps us prove this point here. This reminds each and every one of us. This should remind all of us. Listen, I ain't mad at him for wanting the doll that looks like his. It looks like his little girl. Okay? I ain't mad at him at all. As a matter of fact, now you know how I feel when I'm going and I'm looking for a black baby alive or a black American Girl. I know what it is to go to American Girl doll store. We were in Chicago about 10, 12 years ago, and I'm going to tell you right there, it was not overrun with black dolls. It was not. Okay? I looked around in there. I was downtown in the Miracle Mile in Chicago, and I said, it looks like white folks' place in society is still firmly implanted as of right now. I didn't get mad. I didn't go on television about it and yell it out loud, but he helps to prove a point. I'm not mad at him for wanting a doll. His daughter can have a doll that looks like him. A lot of times, the dolls, you get a doll or whatever that looks like you. You put it next to you, so it's like it's really yours. It's like it's really your child. It's like it's really your sister. Those types of things. So in and of itself, I'm not mad at him about that. But now, hopefully, you understand our reality all the time. So when we turn on television and we don't see something that looks like us, when we go in the classroom, come on, somebody, and don't see anybody that looks like us. When we go to work and don't see somebody that looks like us, you feel like you are isolated and you're there yourself. And of course, going back decades, the doll thing that they did where even the black kids had it ingrained with them that the white doll was the best one.
Because that's all they had been buying.
That's right.
All they could buy. And so they rejected the black doll in the Brown versus Board of Education studies. Even the black kids rejected the black doll that looked like them because they had been they bought white dolls because that's all American manufacturers were making, right?
That's exactly right.
If his daughter starts buying black dolls, if she's tested, she'll pick a black doll as being a symbol of beauty and my friend and what it means to be. I mean, she might accept diversity. She might start fighting for black people and black causes and for a fairer and better America.
Right.
Wow.
It just reminds him that things are changing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it just reminds him that things are changing. Now him and people like him can make as much money on rap artists as they possibly can. They can manage them. I remember doing deals for music artists back in the day. And they said at a certain point, a white lawyer actually has to take this over. Black artists, I had this happen. So the white can do the business or whatever else, but just make sure that your daughter doesn't bring one of them home. And so now here we are having this discussion, and there's a reminder of the fact that things are actually changing, but you can't play with fire and not get burned. So in other words, it's just the same thing I say it all the time, the same thing that make you laugh or make you cry. Things are changing now, and now your daughter or your people or your wife or your teacher or your colleague, your brother, your sister might have a brush with the unfamiliar and feel a different way about it than you do and not be made insecure about it, and to reach out toward it and for it. And that reminds us of the change and everything that's going on. And now what?
Well, look, we're gonna make sure.
This isn't just a new thing. When you go back and you look at, Jenny, you remember the Cabbage Patch doll? How many yellow, black, or brown Cabbage Patch dolls did you see? So this is not a new thing. So his concern, his struggle with this is new to him. But this has been going on for a long, long time now. And I really do feel like things like that, if you can get outside of your own anger with this poor newscaster here, and look at the bigger picture, again, bring us closer, not separate.
Well, look, I just think he's worried that she accidentally picked up the Jamaican American Girl doll, and he come home and she got a pot of oxtail going, talking about wagwan. So
I'm not mad at it.
We got to make sure that we protect this poor white man and his poor white daughter. We'll be back after the break. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
Hello, everyone. It's Kiara Sheard.
Hey, I'm Taj.
I'm Coco.
And I'm Lily. And we're SWV.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
It's the Christmas season. Many of us are going to have office Christmas parties this weekend, family events, and a lot of y'all are lonely as hell and ain't got nobody. But our today's Tech Talk segment, we have somebody who can be able to do something about that. The Amore dating app is a black-owned dating app that could increase their chances of finding love and also getting your grandmama off your back about when you're going to get married. Joining us now, we have Jonathan Joseph Jr., founder and creator of the Amore dating app. Jonathan, talk to me about the app. How exactly does this work, and how is it different than every other dating app on the internet?
Hey, Robert, thanks for having me. That's a great question. What we do is we focus on the preferences that people want when they're looking for a mate. So many times you see people swiping and, you're taking chances with what you're doing. What we're trying to do is focus on your preferences, the things that you want, and match you based on that. We also have what's known as the Love Lounge. which is for the sapiosexual people who are more into intellectual conversation. We have different rooms that we change the topics on daily to allow you to meet with somebody that way as well. So it kind of increases the chances of meeting somebody that's compatible with you rather than just swiping and hoping for the best.
So it's not just a swipe left, swipe right, like Tinder. It's not just creating a profile like, you know, some of the other dating apps. Talk about how the mechanics of this work is more conversational than other apps are.
Yeah, so when you sign in, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions, some personal, some for fun. Just to try to see where you are from a character standpoint. Everyone has to do it, and then we match you based on that. So there's a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, and it goes down from there. And then that's one part of the app. Another part of the app is what I said earlier, which is called the Love Lounge. The Love Lounge is topics that we create. Our team creates it every day. Could be, you know, a whole range of things. Could be political, could be what's happening in the world today. Just so you can kind of get an understanding of who's in your community, and you can match with somebody that way as well. And then the next part of the app is called Discreet Meets. So those are for the traveling people that say, you know what, I just want to find somebody to go to movies with, or a travel partner, or a dinner date. So there's actually 3 components to the app that I think separates us and makes us great.
Okay, so the conversation part, so it's kind of like a clubhouse where people can have conversations with people who have similar interests. Then there's kind of a dating profile section where you put in what you're looking for and you kind of match with people along that. And then you have a section for freaks. So they're just an area for freaks. What you saying?
I knew you was going to go there, Robert. No, I wouldn't call it.
I mean, it sounds like that's for freaks. And ain't nothing wrong with it.
It's called Discreet Meets. That's what we're going to call it. It's called Discreet Meets.
In the words of the prophet CeeLo Green, everybody that's grown got a skeleton bone that got hidden away. Yes, y'all, there's a freaking us, y'all. Just some choose not to say. Don't let them who ain't yet make you the little balls of clay. I'm just saying, look, if it's for freaks, just say it's for freaks and call it the freaks.
I mean, if you want to name it the Boom Boom Room, that's cool. But it's called Discreet Meets, and it's for everyone. It's really, we really thought about that section for travelers. There's a lot of people that travel, they go from city to city, and they say, you know what, I just don't want to eat alone. I'd rather have somebody I can eat with, and this gives them an opportunity to meet people in the area where they're traveling who may feel the same way.
Okay, and so when you're signing up, is this where there's a fee to sign up or different levels of membership? Talk about kind of the mechanics of it and what the success rates are with regards to finding people.
That is a great question. And I think that is where you find, I mean, there's thousands of apps, right? When you log into your Play stores or your Apple store. I think this is what separates us. We don't have paywalls is what it's known as. So, you know, if you go hit the back button, they want to charge you. If you send a message, they want to charge you. We don't do that. We charge one flat rate. Our most expensive plan is $10 a month. It is free to download. But to get to the certain features, you must be a premium member. And in order to be a premium member, it's just $6 a month. So we're not trying to break the bank. You know, we want low costs and high results. And because we're basing it on your preferences, I think we have a higher success rate because it allows you to, you know, base things on characters, traits that you can match with someone else as opposed to just swiping and then trying to find out that that person's not a match for you.
Now, with that, you know, a lot of the prophet Kevin Samuels often said that people have unrealistic expectations. You know, every guy is going to put in, you know, 5'5", brown eyes, caramel skin, long hair, Pam Grier from 1972. Are there ways for people to kind of get an idea of what's actually out there instead of, you know, all the women are going to put 6'4", multi-millionaire, six-pack abs, who also cooks French cuisine and loves his mama, those sorts of things. You know, is there a way to kind of let people know what's out there when they're shaping their preferences, or you just kind of hope you're going to get what you put into the slot machine?
That's a great question. What we have is it's a filter button. So once you fill out your questionnaire, you can match that way. But then as you're going in, you can also filter through and say, okay, I want this particular person. I want this size, you know, this kind of thing, this distance, which is a big one. So you can alter and filter that way because there's a lot of people that, you know, may want to date interracially. And we give them that option. So you can basically see who it is you want to see as opposed to seeing people that, you know, are probably going to have no shot.
All right. We're going to bring the panel in. Pastor Wright, do you have any questions?
See, now you have to go to me first on that one, huh?
Ladies first, of course.
As a disclaimer, it is the holidays. It is the week before Christmas. I do not want my gifts to be replaced with a lump of coal. I will not be asking any questions nor visiting your Facebook page.
All right, Scott, did you have a question? Scott, you there, or are you trying to download the freak section of the app real quick?
I'm coming. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry. Good doctor, I appreciate this app and stuff, although I'm a married man. But you had one of your promotions of this article I saw had to do with sapiosexuals, if you will. Could you tell us about how you can isolate sapio or sapiosexuals, people who are attracted to really intelligent people?
Correct. So when we created the Love Lounges, we did that with the mindset that we wanted to create a platform for people that, okay, great, you look good, you may be attractive, but what's inside, right? So we created the Love Lounge with different topics that people, might resonate with certain people so that they can log in with like-minded people who want to talk about that same topic and have a discussion. And then that way you might like what that person, him or her, is saying, and you can match with them that way as well. So it's just another aspect of meeting someone.
So how do you know if you're attracted to people who are intelligent? So is that all it is, or do they have a sexual relationship as well? I don't know.
I think that one it all depends on the people. I think obviously there has to be some sort of attraction there, right? If we're talking about being a mate. But I think people are trying to find something more than that. I think the apps are not allowing you, some of them are not allowing you to find out more about that person, dig in deeper. It's not allowing you to do that. So now, I've been in the restaurant business for 20 years. I actually own a bar in Baltimore called Happy Hour Heaven. And I've seen first dates fail consistently. And 80% of them are, dating app dates. And it's for that reason.
Well, I've long argued to my friends and fraternity brothers that one of the most attractive what is a sexual attraction is intelligence for most people, whether they realize it or not, right? Or humor, before you get to the physical part of the relationship.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think the pictures, to me, is like window shopping, right?
Yeah.
You still have to try on the suit, try on the tie, make sure it fits you.
And have somebody to talk to.
Right.
With some reasonable intelligence, right?
I couldn't agree more.
Look, I wish I had the hope and optimism of y'all, but Joe, do you have a question?
I'm having so much fun with this.
You just want to hear more about the boom boom room.
Right.
Yeah, because the sapio area sound like that's the ugly people area. Like, if you're ugly with your personality, you go over to the talking section to see if you go over to the talking section to see if you can pull somebody over there. But
the boom boom room.
Back to the freak.
The boom boom room.
Don't have your question about the freaks.
All right, we're having entirely too much fun here. But so let me ask you. I'm a little old-fashioned. I met my wife 30 years ago in college, and it took a brother 9 years, but we eventually got married. So there weren't any dating apps. So how would this be something that distinguishes itself for people that think that meeting someone online is still taboo, or someone that is not into dating apps, so they don't think they'd be into dating apps? Why would this be any different for them? And then the other question I would be is there any screening for safety-related reasons?
Okay, all great questions. I remember growing up that I could bond in the grocery store over, maybe Cinnamon Toast Crunch if we had like cereal, right? Or maybe I could be a gentleman and help a young lady pump the gas, and I could meet a woman that way. These days, those things are, because of COVID and everybody's got their phones in. It's very difficult for people to meet now. So dating apps is what's happening. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think for us, we're more than a dating app. I think the Love Lounge allows us to be more than a dating app. And also, when you're putting your preferences in and you match with somebody, the chances that you find someone that you can at least have an intelligent conversation with, like we were saying earlier, go up significantly. So I think that would be some of the things that separate us. For the people that are not wanting to do a traditional dating app, I think we fall right in that line with that. Safety is one of those things we take very seriously. We have a disclaimer when you go into any of our rooms that say, use common sense. Don't give out your phone number if you're going to meet someone. If you're going to meet someone off the app, please meet them in a public place. We even leave tips to say, if you're going in a restaurant, please let the host know, hey, I'm here and I'm on a first date, so that everybody's aware of what's happening. Because the fact of the matter is there are people who are, just not right in the head. And unfortunately, they prey on apps like this to find people that are vulnerable. But yeah, we have things in place. If there's anyone who's experienced some sort of dating trauma or anything like that, we have 1-800 number listed on the app. So we try to make sure from the Amore community that we're offering everything that we can for our people. And you can even report someone in the app. If you don't feel comfortable with a message you got sent or anything like that, you can send a message out, we can block that user immediately. And there's a no 3-strike rule thing. It's a one time and you're done. And we just completely take them off the app. So we take things like that very seriously.
All right. So the name of the app, how can people download it in the App Store, social media? How can people follow you? Plug away. We're trying to get people into the saposexual area of the app to do some conversations. We know they're going to go to the freak section.
Saposexual. So we're on Instagram at Amore_AHA. We're on Facebook at Amore Dating App. And then you can also find us in the Google and Apple Play stores. We're already in there. We're live. We're ready to go in there as well. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in the community.
All right, and also, what's the name of your place in Baltimore? I might swing by.
Happy Hour Heaven.
All right, Happy Hour Heaven. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining.
And Robert, are you a saposexual? I don't know.
Are you a
saposexual?
No, you want to hear something funny? Me and my wife actually met at a freak party about 15 years ago that we did not know we were at. We both went with other people. We both ended up at a party with other people, and we were just in the corner horrified by the stuff going on. And we got married.
Robert, I don't think we're supposed to say that.
Unifying thing.
At least one of y'all knew what was going on.
Neither one of y'all knew what was going on. Look, this is how much I ain't know what was going on. I was helping to set up the food and stuff. I thought it was just a regular house party. I'm going to pick up wings and stuff. Man. I had no idea. So there's nothing to say you can't find yourself a good man or woman at the freak party. You don't just have to be in the ugly people section. But shout out. Download the app. Get you somebody for Christmas. All right. That was a great show. Roland will be back at some point. I'll be around if y'all need me. Great show today. Want to thank Scott. Want to thank Pastor Willis. Want to thank Joe for joining us. Want to thank all of our guests. Want to thank everyone for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe, follow, make your send your donations in to Roland to keep this going. Black media is crucial. You don't have these conversations on Newsmax because they're talking about the American Girl doll. And as we say, holla. Thank you.